Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks for joining us this Friday. We're going to spend much of the next hour on what else but impeachment, I grant you. But first, a look at some other stories we'll also be covering this hour. We're going to show you how the administration is shredding the social safety net and why a government that spends trillions to try to save what amounts to pocket change in the backs of the neediest among us. Then Nancy Pelosi's daughter Christine joins us to discuss her famous mother, who's had quite a week here, and the book she just wrote about the Speaker of the House and her rise to power. Also, New York and New Jersey battling over the homeless. Neither one wants them. We're going to show you why Newark is suing the Big Apple, saying it's dumping the homeless in their city. But we begin with a late development on impeachment. The White House will not participate in House hearings. That word late this afternoon from White House counsel Pat Cipollone. He used his letter to House Democrats to attack the entire impeachment process. That means the president will not be directly represented in the impeachment process until a Senate trial. As for the rest of the day's impeachment headlines and the details you need to know before we hit the weekend, let's bring in senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman.
And Rich, the focus right now is on Monday's upcoming hearing in the Judiciary Committee, which will be something of a self-contained one. The witnesses will be attorneys from both parties from the committees that have already held hearings to report on what they've found. That will be the material upon which any articles of impeachment will be written. So the Democratic and Republican counsels from the Intelligence Committee will summarize their findings. We'll hear more about the conclusions of the diplomats who testified about the Ukraine pressure scheme and the Republican defense of that, probably including their Ukraine conspiracy theories. And the counsels for the Judiciary Committee will testify before their own panel on two topics. One, the conclusions of the constitutional scholars who appeared before them on Wednesday. The other topic, Judiciary's continuing examination of the obstruction examples cited within the Mueller report. Another sign that impeachment may include a Mueller-related article. Now, that public hearing is set for 9 a.m. Monday morning, and we will have live coverage Monday at 9 right here on the channel you're watching, plus analysis Monday night at 6 on RFL, as well as a rebroadcast of key clips from the hearing to follow RFL. That begins 7 p.m. Monday night. Now, the focus of Monday's hearing gives us a bit more insight into what the articles of impeachment might eventually look like, as well as when the House might get to that finish line. Right now, articles focusing on abuse of power and bribery seem most likely, both related to the Ukraine pressure scheme, but it's not clear yet if that would end up as one article of impeachment or two separate articles. An additional article on obstruction of Congress for blocking witnesses and documents from investigators also seems pretty likely. The fourth possible focus is less certain at this point. That would be Trump's Mueller probe obstruction. Again, put that in the maybe column. And even that is just the next step in a detailed process. The Judiciary Committee would vote first on grounds for impeachment, then on any articles they draw up from there. From there, the debate and the vote shift to the House floor. If 218 members vote for any single article, the president is impeached. After that, House Democrats would select impeachment managers for a Senate trial. For reference, 13 Republicans were selected as managers in the trial of Bill Clinton. Then the action would move to the Senate. The Chief Justice would be sworn in to preside first. Then the Senate debates amongst themselves. They also deal and vote on rules for the trial. Once that is done, the trial begins. It would run 6 days a week until it is concluded. The Senate schedule can't be known until the president is impeached, but here's the schedule on the House side. Monday is that hearing in Judiciary, giving the committee the rest of the week to vote on articles of impeachment. Thursday, the 12th, looks most likely like their most likely voting day. The following week, December 16th through the 20th, look for the vote to impeach the president on the House floor. Now, as far as the votes go, unless something major changes, Democrats have the votes in the House to impeach, but in the Senate, it's looking like a long shot at best to remove the president from office. 20 Republican senators would have to go along with that, so don't hold your breath. Finally, some mixed messaging about how the Senate will handle an impeachment trial. As you know, the president and some MAGA House Republicans want to turn the witness list into an enemies list, threatening to call Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, the Bidens, even the whistleblower. But Mitch McConnell is now suggesting that he doesn't want the Senate heading down that partisan path. He thinks it could hurt the GOP. And by the way, with far more Republican senators running in vulnerable re-election bids next year than there are Democrats, his caucus has more to lose in all of this. But McConnell also issued a threat that if he and Chuck Schumer can't agree on trial and witness rules, he may just ask the Chief Justice to put those rules up to partisan votes, so only the GOP would make up the trial rules in that example. Rich?
Well, let's start there. You're right. There is mixed concerns for McConnell. He's got vulnerable fellow Republicans up here, some in states here where the plurality want to see the president not only impeached but removed. On the flip side, he's certainly not going to give Schumer everything he wants.
No.
What's the betting line here at the end of the day? Listen, some of the names we've heard from some House Republicans, they'd love to see Vice President Biden, Hunter Biden testify. They'd love to see Nancy Pelosi or even Adam Schiff sit in the witness chair here, the whistleblower whose identity is obviously protected by statute. They'd want to out him and say, I don't think any of those are realistically going to happen. But isn't the bigger debate about who Democrats want to hear from that McConnell won't put in the chair?
Well, yes, but again, the witness list and the processing of the witness is usually and has historically been done by agreement of the two parties. McConnell and Schumer, in this case, would have to agree.
You said the word historically. We are in
I understand. But
typical times.
But that's what makes this even more difficult path for the Democrats. If Schumer says, we want Mulvaney and Bolton, that's a pretty big ask. And people who are pretty close to the president, how does McConnell respond? Okay, but give us Alexandra Chalupa and Hunter Biden. I mean, once you start getting it, you can say that the Democrats have a valid reason for their requests and the Republicans don't, but that's not going to be of much consolation to Mitch McConnell. So one hopes that they would, if there's going to be a deal, and I'm guessing there will be, it'll be very limited in terms of those big name witnesses.
But it does seem that McConnell is pushing back against House members in super red districts who would love nothing else than a spectacle, and the White House who wants this to be payback time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because, this isn't a great love here for jurisprudence. He's got political navigations that he's got to figure out for his fellow senators, and then also here for if there's going to be payback. So, he's in a rock and a hard place, McConnell.
He's in a fairly difficult spot, and that's why one of the big concerns the Democrats had a couple of weeks ago was that McConnell will just dismiss all of the charges, which he could theoretically do, but they would take so much,
And by the way, he's up for re-election himself right now.
He's not considered particularly vulnerable.
Unless this were to go really south. And then finally,
Arizona, Colorado, Georgia,
and let's talk about some of those states here. We've got some polling in, and while it hasn't moved radically, some of the states where the president won, he's really underwater right now.
He is. I mean, it's interesting because in most of these states he started underwater after Election Day, even in states that he won. But the numbers haven't rebounded.
Like double digits.
If we can show that poll, this is the differences in his approval margin. The left column, obviously the states, but then that's the approval margin. So he's 13 points underwater in Iowa. That means 13% more people say they disapprove of him than approve of him. And as you can see, in most of those states, the numbers are holding fairly steady.
Historically, this is horrible for a president once re-election.
Well, he won Iowa, he won Wisconsin, he won Michigan, he won Ohio, he won Pennsylvania, and he lost Minnesota. But, in those first 5 states, he won them in 2016, and he's 5 points underwater in his personal approval rating in the best one. And they're not changing either. That's the other thing. So Democrats concerned that impeachment might hurt them or help the president. It doesn't look like either is holding true at this point.
All right. So we got the political component to this, Andrew. Thank you very much. Let's bring in the legal side to this and join us to discuss all things impeachment, plus the latest shenanigans from Rudy Giuliani, whom you can't make up here. Former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. All right, Gene, a lot I want to get from you. Let me first start off, though, with a clip. And this is from Professor Turley, who I thought acquitted himself pretty well, even if I didn't necessarily agree with his arguments. But one of his big ones was, what's the rush?
Impeachments have to be based on proof, not presumptions. That's the problem when you move towards impeachment on this abbreviated schedule that has not been explained to me. Why you want to set the record for the fastest impeachment. Fast is not good for impeachment. Narrow, fast impeachments have failed.
Now, listen, I think it's a compelling argument about the political calendar that's going on here, that you don't want to drag this thing out until late spring, early summer when you got an election in November. But that said, why isn't there an argument, even counting politics in the equation, that Speaker Pelosi says, okay, you know what, Turley, you make a compelling point. Probably a better one than the president and his attorneys have made here. So here's the deal. I'm going to ask the Supreme Court to fast-track decisions on the president's financial records, on subpoenaed witnesses that have decided not to appear, on evidence that would be additive to this, Supreme Court, take your time, but let's get these decisions done by the end of February at the latest, and then we can have an expedited trial in the Senate. Why is that a bad thing?
Because it's not going to happen. If they ask the Supreme Court to fast track any of these issues, the taxes, the subpoenas, the executive privilege issues, the absolute privilege issues, it's not going to be resolved in probably May or June when the Supreme Court adjourns for the rest of the year. I want to say this about Professor Turley. He is brilliant. There's no getting around that. No one can debate that he is very smart. I have two concerns about him. One is consistency. When it came to Bill Clinton in November 1998, he essentially wanted the death penalty for Bill Clinton over an indiscretion about which he lied, and the entire fabric of our democracy and Constitution was at risk. Fast forward to now, when you have a president who has engaged in the most corrupt behavior any president in our history has, and we have evidence up the wazoo that he committed textbook bribery, if not extortion, he now is saying, let's not move too fast. We have moved fast. The Mueller report, Volume 2, if not Volume 1, after 2 years of investigation, that is the framework for an indictment against the President of the United States. All you have to do is look at it in the House Judiciary Committee, and you have one article on Volume 2, obstruction. All right? So we haven't moved fast on that issue. On the other issues, Ukraine, he committed the crime in July. We've been investigating for about 80 days, which is equal to about the time that we reviewed the Starr report. So it gets back to consistency. Turley is brilliant, but he is very inconsistent in his argument. I disagree. We don't need to do this. Let's ask the Supreme Court to help us. We have enough now. Let's wrap this present, put a bow on it, and by December 19th, he should be voted on articles of impeachment. And ironically, Richard, December 19th of this year is the anniversary, in effect, of the 1998 December 19 vote by the House of Bill Clinton. What an irony.
Absolutely. When we talk about inconsistency with Turley, there's consistency when it comes to the crazy and Rudy Giuliani. Can you explain to me what he is doing in Ukraine and why the president, if he still considers him his personal attorney, would let his mouthpiece head over there to do some documentary with some right-wing lunatic fringe crew here? You can't make this up, Gene.
I've been on your show quite often, and this is the craziest behavior of any individual I've ever seen with such a stellar background and legal background. All right, here's what I want to say about Rudy Giuliani and the president. Under Title 21 of drug laws, and I prosecuted many of those, there's a statute in that title, Title 21, called Continuing Criminal Enterprise, CCE. What we are watching with the president and his attorney flunky, Rudy Giuliani, is a CCE. What Rudy is doing is he's building a case for the House Judiciary, the House of Representatives in its entirety, and in the Senate, because what is Rudy doing? He is doing this. We almost got away with bank robbery, so Rudy, I'm going back to the same bank, and I'm trying to get a receipt for the cash from the teller. That's essentially what Rudy's doing. He is continuing to commit a potential crime against the United States, and here's the worst part of it. He is doing it at the behest of the President of the United States. And this whole thing about corruption, they don't care about corruption. All they care about is the Bidens. And that is why he will be impeached by the House.
So then we get to the Senate, and I agree with you, Gene. It's depending on how many articles, either way, it's going to go to the Senate. As Andrew laid out, we're going to have our trial. How important a role do you think Roberts will have We know that he's concerned that the Supreme Court is being seen as yet another political arm like the executive and legislative branch. And he's concerned, and I think rightfully so, the Supreme Court's going to be seen through the same prism. And you go back to Bush v. Gore here, and it really has only gone downhill from there. To that end, do you think when it's said and done, we will be pleasantly surprised that he will not only call, balls and strikes fairly, but that if called upon to compel witnesses to testify, he may take a more active role than we've seen in the past? Or will he be more like Rehnquist, which is, my role, is a good umpire here, not to be seen or heard, but to only get involved when I have to?
Well, I'm going to say this, and it's going to surprise people. Chief Justice Roberts, to me, is the opposite of Attorney General Bill Barr, who has just lost his moral compass and has become just a political hack and an embarrassment to the Department of Justice. I don't agree with Justice Roberts on all his opinions, but I think Justice Roberts has an incredible moral and legal compass. He's brilliant, of course, but I think he's going to look at this trial and he's going to say, I have to be a judge and I have to be an umpire. And I don't care who's on the mound pitching. I don't care who's at the plate trying to hit. I don't care who the players are in the outfield or the players in the dugouts or the fans in the stands. I'm going to be an umpire and call it the way I see it. I have high hopes that Chief Justice Roberts is going to rise to the occasion and try to be the fairest jurist possible, and it's going to be nasty. It's going to be a nasty trial. I've done a lot of trials, and this one's going to be, I hope it doesn't engage in a food fight, like a scene out of Animal House in the cafeteria. And Chief Justice Roberts is going to look at history and what history is going to think about him. And I think he is going to rise to the occasion and exercise a judicial temperament that I think all Americans are going to be proud of.
Well, I hope you're right. Certainly, we've been looking for a hero. We don't want the Chief Justice to come out like Bluto in a toga in Animal House. Hey, Gene, as always, yes. Thank you so much, my friend. Have a terrific weekend for yourself. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, everybody, when we come back, what we're going to do is something different. Not the yelling back and forth. Some of you may support Trump, some of you may condemn him. We will separate without opinion fact from fiction when it comes to impeachment. And when it comes to the GOP narrative, there is a lot of fiction to pour through. We're going to do that after this break.